Welcome to the Connors Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. Obviously, it's an election year, but next year is an election year too. And I understand an old friend of the show is going to be running for office next year. Marvin Jeffcoat, welcome to Connors Corner.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Marvin, where do you live in Queens? And I understand you're going to be running for city council. Where is that?
Correct. I live in the 26th district. I live in Woodside on 45th Street near St. Teresa's. And the district encompasses Woodside, Sunnyside, Long Island City, and a little bit of Astoria.
So you might overlap a little bit with AOC's congressional district then.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right in the middle of the heart of Woodside. And, I'm doing my best to help John Cummings. He has a very good shot. She's really unpopular, but she is really working the district, and John has been out as well. But, anybody that's not bitten with the socialist bug and that's emotionally frenzied about her and her new wave ideology, anybody that has a clear mind and can think for themselves can see she's just another person that's going to lead us down the road to disaster. The things that she wants to do have never worked anywhere in the world, and I hope we get into a little bit of the history of socialism, communism, all the same thing, and what they've done. They've decimated parts of the world, and they continue to do so. I don't know why we have to re-educate every generation that this stuff just doesn't work.
Now, you and I met at Catholic War veteran events. You served in the military. Where'd you serve?
I served in Fort Benning. I started out as a reservist while I was in high school and college in the 812th MP Company, but then I went on active duty, served at Fort Benning, Fort Campbell, Fort Benning, and Fort Bragg mostly, a couple of tours in Korea. I was in Desert Storm and combat operations, and I retired out of Fort Drum. So most of the time I spent in the Airborne Infantry, Airborne Ranger, doing fun stuff.
So listen, obviously we're on radio and people, don't see a picture of you ordinarily. You're African American and you decided to become a Republican. Why did you do that?
I did that basically because of the history. I've always been a fan of history. And if you look at the genesis of the Republican Party, it was formed because the Whigs were too cowardly to take up the issue of slavery again and end it. And Republicans have always been about freedom and self-reliance. Now, our latest leadership, up until Donald Trump, has done a very poor job of letting people know just who we are, and they've sat back and let the Democrats paint the picture of us, which is totally inaccurate. Self-reliance, it takes a lot of work and willpower, but it's the way to go. The Democrats have always been the party of slavery and socialism, and I think that a lot of Marx, Lenin, and other socialists like Hitler, they drew off of what the Democrats did to develop their ideology and their systems. So that's definitely not the party I want to be associated with.
Yeah, well, actually, I understand a lot of the laws from Nazi Germany were derived from the Jim Crow laws of the Southern Democrats after the Civil War.
Absolutely. My understanding is that that's how he drafted his Nuremberg laws.
Uh-huh.
They looked at that. You talked with Ellis about Margaret Sanger. They looked at some of what she did with eugenics. I mean, these are horrible people, Democrats, Planned Parenthood. And people don't realize, they say to me, you're kind of wonkish and you talk history. How does that affect my bottom line here and now today? Well, if you look at it, Margaret Sanger formed Planned Parenthood, and the Democrats they're doing this to everybody, by the way. I don't stop at the race line because they've pretty much gotten control of and tried to decimate the Black American community, but they're doing that across every pedigree. And so these people, these evil people, once they have no use for you anymore, they've convinced mothers and fathers in some cases to abort their babies. I mean, that is horrible. You can't get any more malicious than that. I mean, you're telling somebody to kill their offspring, and they talk about my body, my choice, but nobody asked the baby. I think it was Reagan that said if babies had a vote, we wouldn't have abortion.
Well,
Whoever said that was smart because it's true.
well, like we've had it on enough, but Margaret Sanger was truly. I mean, the word racist obviously is used, too wildly. Too, it's not used to cover it. But she was a racist.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because in order for us to unite, whites have to stop fearing the word racist, and blacks have to stop overusing it. I mean, if if you have a shortcoming, and I hope we talk about the way Democrats try to make blacks feel defective so they can control them. But if you lose at something in life, you have to do some self-reflection, take responsibility, and make corrections so that you can succeed next time. But if you know you're not a racist, you can't let somebody call you a racist. You got to stand up to them. President Trump has denounced racism and white supremacy going back over 40 years. And every time he goes on TV, he has to renew that vow again like he's never done it before. And these people that do that, they're disingenuous. They know it. And they get away with doing it because you have a lot of people that are out there that are misinformed. And that's the only thing they can stick on him, because when you talk to somebody about, well, what don't you like about the president? After all he's done for everybody in America, they say, well, and I say, well, no, I don't know, so please tell me. And the one thing they seem to be able to go back to is the racism card. And being a racist is a really vile thing to be, and that was Margaret Sanger and Adolf Hitler. So I could see how someone would be taken aback to be considered a racist, but if you're not, you owe it to everybody around you to stand up and say, no, you're wrong, I'm not, and this is why. And once we get to that point where we take individual responsibility for who and what we are, and we're able to call other people out and say, no, I'm not going to allow you to define who I am, that's when we can unite and we can fight the socialism that has infested our government, our bureaucracy, and every one of our institutions. I mean, it really is the cancer that's destroying us from within.
Now, we talked about Ellison. He was on our show a few weeks ago, and maybe, I'm not saying from my point of view, maybe he went too far from my point of view, but what do you think of his comments?
Well, I think it was alarming. We need to unite as Christians and educate others and confront Democrats and their global socialist masters. As Christians, we need to start voting for our own best interests. We're working class people, we're managerial, we're pro-life, yet we vote these people in that want to control our lives and do the exact opposite. And it's a known fact that the socialist goal has always been to replace religion with the state. The salient point for me that sticks out from Ellis is his description of how Democrats make blacks feel defective to control them. Now, who would describe that process used by global socialists in his book, Masters of Deception? Where socialists, they targeted American clergy for induction or scorn and contempt if they couldn't control them. And Ellis describes an enlightened black vantage point. He's a Southern black. He grew up on a plantation or in the Jim Crow South. But global socialists have done that with every pedigree to make them feel disaffected and disenfranchised from American patriotism. So it's not just a black issue. He takes the black perspective. But if you look at it, they've done it to everybody in order to divide and conquer us. Yuri Bezmenov described what he termed as the soft brainwashing when he defected from the Soviet Union in the 1980s. And that's really taken a toll on young white males in their sense of self-worth. And that's important because blacks are 12% of the U.S. population, Asians about 4%, but whites are 79%, and that's a lot of disaffected people. So it's not this thing where, if you get up every morning and you have to go to work saying, how am I going to overcome my defect and my handicap? They really have you in a bad way. So it's not a color issue. It's not letting the enemy, the socialists among us, paint you as what they want you to be.
Now, let me ask you, we talked a little bit before we got on the air. Kamala Harris, do you have any comments about her and her candidacy as a law school graduate and so forth?
Correct. She's another vile person. As a law school graduate, having to take the professional ethics exam. You know, she violated her oath, and California should look to disbar her, but as long as Becerra is in charge, another Democrat, as long as you have these Democratic machine-run states and cities, there's never going to be any accountability and justice. But, you know, she's violated her oath. Number one, she prosecuted a lot of young black men, if you want to put the race element in there, for minor infractions, things that Joe Biden's son Hunter gets away with carte blanche. But yeah, if you violate the law, you open yourself up, so you have to deal with that. But what she did is she covered up evidence that would have exonerated people in order to have a winning record. I think that's disgusting and despicable. You know, she denied people their liberty knowingly, with malice. I mean, what she did is criminal. She should be prosecuted for it, and at a minimum, she should be disbarred because she's an unethical person. And that's not somebody you want to be your vice president. God forbid if they would have won, number one, God forbid that. But if they did win and something happened to Joe Biden, God forbid she becomes the president. She's as unethical as he is with Burisma and China and all these other dirty dealings that the press won't deal with, and the FBI, Department of Justice, doesn't seem to be able to prosecute. I mean, you know, you have evidence of crime, and they won't do anything about it. So she's not a good person.
Well, you know, you talked about Joe Biden and hacking along. You know, I see a lot of people, and I see people at the beginning stages of Alzheimer's and dementia, whatever. And, you know, I probably see hundreds, if not that. I probably have seen hundreds, if not thousands, of those people over the years. And I tell you, Joe Biden's in there.
I think so. You know, he forgets key things, simple things, like, is he running for the Senate or is he running for the presidency of the United States? I mean, you know, he's not sharp at all. I mean, it's a wonder he remembers that he's a Democrat. At least he can remember that much. I think that it shows you the depravity of the Democrat Party. I mean, is this really the best they can put up? After all President Trump has done for this country, I mean, rising tide lifts all boats. And until they attacked him with the Wuhan flu, he had this country firing on all cylinders, and we were getting things done. Jobs were being created, manufacturing was being brought back. And once they saw in Davos, Switzerland, that they couldn't buy him, they got scared and they decided to sidetrack him. But then they put up the two worst people. I mean, Kamala Harris on that stage was the least liked person, and Joe Biden was the least sharp among them. And it's clear that he has cognitive issues where he can't remember critical things. He can't even remember what state he's in, what office he's running for. And they're using him. They're taking advantage of him. I don't know why. I mean, I don't think he has the popularity or the credibility. He just sold Barack Hussein Obama down the drain, I hear, because he's going to make it Biden care instead of Obamacare. But I wouldn't want to put my name on any of that because it's the utopian language that they use. They call it something that it's not. It's not the Affordable Care Act. It's the I'm going to take everybody's care and give it to somebody else act. But they put up the two worst candidates, and they're taking advantage of a man that clearly has diminished capacity. I don't think he's cognizant enough to sign his own will. I think that
you know what? I hate to say it, but I make a lot of judgment calls whether somebody can sign a will. I think he probably could, but at the same time, I think he's getting to the point where he may not be able to.
You know, if I was practicing, I would be afraid to be part of that process with him.
Well, let me ask you, so you're talking about bad leadership. We both live in New York City. You're going to be running for the city council. You know, talk about bad leadership. Could it be worse than what we have in New York City right now?
I don't think so. I think Antifa and BLM are more active in out west, in Portland and Seattle. That might make it worse, but the leadership itself, it could not be any worse. I mean, from the state down to the city, they're violating our First, 14th, and 5th Amendments. I mean, you look at the Takings Clause. They've basically rendered business worthless, and there's no compensation. Letting somebody move out into the street is not compensation, but they're not even doing it on the sidewalks. They're putting them in the streets where people are unsafe. This whole movement to defund the police is because they got caught. You know, it's difficult to explain to voters how history impacts their current lives. But the infiltration of our government and bureaucracy began way back before 1919, and we see the devastating effects of it with Antifa BLM in New York, Seattle, and Portland. And they were key communist strongholds back in 1958 when Hoover wrote Masters of Deception. Now, these same cities have bankrupted their jurisdictions with mandatory race justice and gender identity training simultaneously, all at once. So none of this was by accident. Now they seek to defund their police department. I mean, that's a total dereliction of duty. They're placing life, liberty, and freedom at peril. And they're trying to make up for their fiscal mismanagement with those mandatory training courses for city employees by taking it away from the police department. This serves a dual purpose. It creates the chaos and fear that they need for their takeover, but it also undermines our Judeo-Christian value system. So there's poor leadership examples all over the place. But I'll tell you, another area of poor leadership is the Chamber of Commerce, because I look at the local saloons. They've had their property basically taken from them, and they pay dues to be in the Chamber of Commerce, and nobody's standing up for them. I can't understand how they haven't filed a class action for a Fifth Amendment Takers Clause violation. You look at the church, finally, Bishop DiMarzio and them, they filed a suit against, I think it was Cuomo, for violating our First Amendment rights. You can go to Costco and Walmart, but you can't go to Mass on a Sunday. I mean, that's ridiculous. And once, it's funny, they start with religion. You have, like Ellis said, you have your brown shirts out there in the form of Antifa, BLM, enforcing their new rules, and also they're taking away your religious liberties. They started bullying the Orthodox Jewish community, and they rebelled against that. I'm very proud of them for doing that. Our Jewish brothers and sisters were right to do that. And I'm finally glad to see Bishop DiMarzio take the lead on that and file suit. But unfortunately, probably an Obama-appointed judge, he didn't squash it, but they I don't know exactly where the case is right now, but they kind of put a pause on it. But it's very poor leadership. The money's out. He's going to have to lay off those 22,000 city workers. Managers are being furloughed. He's causing a lot of pain in the city. He's handicapped the police. You and I were both MPs, and as you know, the first lesson you learn in MP school is the first level of force is a show of force. In order for us to get back the streets and make them safe, there's going to have to be a violent confrontation. I mean, we know that. We realize that. When this is all over with and somebody else takes over, the police are going to have to go back and show their presence. And all the intelligence work they did, everything they did under Giuliani to make this city safe is lost. They're going to have to start from scratch, and they're going to have to confront these people. So he's put everybody in peril, and he won't back down. He's doubled down on what he's doing. There's a lot of evidence out there that the masks don't work and the mandates don't work. The mandatory shutdowns, they don't work, and they refuse to hear this evidence. So what I want to do is I want to ask the questions why you made the decisions you made when you made them, and I want to prosecute these people. They violated our rights. 14th Amendment. The bars are being treated differently than restaurants. I mean, there's no evidence whatsoever that eating food would block COVID-19. None. But they force bars to have to serve food. That's a 14th Amendment violation. They're being treated differently. And I hear a rumor, lawyers should never work on rumor, but I hear a rumor that the restaurant industry lobbied Cuomo so that they could have that edict put in the lockdown. So now, and people say, well, how does your theory on globalism and transnational corporations, how does that factor into my daily life? Well, here you go. You have these transnational corporations and these international players that, they come up with these rules with carve-outs for themselves, and all your local mom and pop shop saloons and pubs, they'll go out of business. Guess what? You can only now drink at Applebee's or Longhorn or any of the other, at least national chains. And, when AOC chased away Amazon, I'm not, Amazon is a transnational corporation, but we could have negotiated that so that we could employ people in Ravenswood and the Queensbridge houses and other parts of my district. But, she chased them all away. But Amazon will be happy to come back in after this lockdown kills all. I mean, de Blasio is stringing this thing out so long that businesses are going to be gone forever. Guess what? Amazon, Costco, and the rest of them will be happy to move in and take over the mom and pop shop business. But the difference is that they're going to dictate to you what's available for you to buy, so you no longer have a choice. I mean, it all plays in.
You're making some very good points. You're making a lot of common sense. Hopefully, we're going to see you at the victory party a little over a year from now.
I hope so.
Right. Marvin, thank you for everything. Thank you for your service to the country, in the military. Thank you for, fighting the good fight out there in Queens.
And Mike, if I might say, tell your listeners to go to marvinjeffcoat.com if they can help out with our campaign, make donations. We're going to need troops on the ground to collect signatures and get the word out about the common sense things we want to do for the district. So marvinjeffcoat.com.
Yeah, and you're going to be on the show as much as you want after the first of the year.
Thank you very much.
All right, Marvin, good luck.